Today we're going to learn all about provisional cast-ons. I get really excited about provisional cast-ons, and I think you will too. First, you may be thinking, what is a provisional cast-on? A provisional cast-on is basically a temporary cast-on that's done with a waste yarn, which waste yarn is just yarn not used in your project that's going to be pulled out and tossed after you're done using it. Why would I want to do this? Well, for a couple reasons. Sometimes when you cast on and bind off, your cast on and bind off usually are not going to match as far as width. It may be not very obvious on a short piece, but if you're making like a long rectangle, getting those cast on and bind off edges to be the same, stretchy and width is nearly impossible. In fact, a lot of times you'll wind up with more of a swoop than a clear rectangle. And so anytime you have a long edge, it's rectangular shaped, or maybe a sweater that's knit from side to side where you cast on the sides. A provisional cast on is an excellent choice there. That way those stitches from the temporary cast on can be put back on the needle and both edges can be bound off. That way they are identical. Another reason, maybe your pattern, you have your cast on edges and it's temporary, and you pick those up. You just put them back on the needle, and then you're going to continue to work off of that in some way. If you see the word provisional cast on, I know many of you, I'm like, just use a provisional cast on. You kind of deer in the headlights. I don't know how to do that. Here's a trick, and it's very important. Any cast on is a provisional cast on if you use waste yarn. So if you don't know a tricky provisional cast on to use, just use waste yarn. Work your project, and then all you have to do is pick it out. It might not just, zip out like opening a dog food bag, which I can't do that anyway. Even with provisional cast-ons, usually wind up having to pull it out. But it'll work, so you don't have to learn anything special to do a provisional cast-on. However, today I have two cast-ons that Mom's going to teach you about that are great provisional cast-on. The first one is the chained crochet cast-on. On this swatch that she has, she actually did it with the working yarn instead of a waste yarn, because it is also a nice cast on. You might notice, cool thing about it is it matches your basic bind off, the pullover bind off that this it looks exactly like it. So it's cool to know for that reason, but it also makes a great provisional that can be pulled out, and it's not hard to do. So there's the chain crochet cast on. Nice to know. The one that I get most excited about is the provisional stranded. It's not necessarily for the faint of heart. It's a little harder, but it is so cool. I think it's worth learning. Okay, this is the beginning. Let me get her swatch right. Check it out. I didn't pick these stitches up and put them on the yarn. That's what the cast on does. It actually works it so that the provisional cast on stitches are already on a strand of yarn, ready to be slipped onto the needle and go. You don't have to go back and put them on the needle later to continue. Even cooler is that instead of a strand of yarn, you can use the cable of a circular needle. That way they're already on the needle, ready to go. You just let it hang there, and when you're done, it's on the needle. You can bind off, continue, whatever. It is a little harder to do. So here's Mom. She's going to show you how to do both of these.
A provisional cast on is a temporary cast on, so use a piece of scrap or waste yarn. Preferably, this should be a smooth yarn in a contrasting color. Cotton works very well. I'd like to mention that actually any cast-on worked with waste yarn becomes a temporary cast-on. You just remove it when you need the stitches from this edge again. Although I do think you'll see the advantages of using one of those given here. This first provisional cast-on we're going to talk about is the crocheted chain cast-on. Begin with a short tail and place a slip knot on a crochet hook. It should be a comparable size to the knitting needle you will be using. Place the needle over the yarn and make a slip stitch. Return the yarn to the back of the needle and make another slip stitch. Yarn to the back, slip stitch. You will notice that I'm bringing the crochet hook to the left of the yarn and hooking it through. This creates a twist in the chain that forms below the needle. For an open chain, bring the hook to the right of the yarn and hook it through. When you have the needed number of stitches less 1, bring the yarn behind the needle and place the stitch from the hook on the needle for the last cast on stitch. You can see the difference here between the twisted chains and the open chains. And here it is on a swatch. Since this is a temporary cast on and it will be removed later, it really does not matter if the chain is twisted or open. Although this cast on is not limited to a provisional cast on. Use your project yarn and it becomes just another method of casting on. Working this cast on with your project yarn and the open loops creates a cast on that matches the standard pullover bind off. This would be very good for anything where matching edges would be desirable, such as baby blankets, afghans, or scarves. If using this as a provisional cast on, place the live stitches from the first row of your project yarn onto a needle and remove the waste yarn. In theory, this chain should just unzip, although I'm apparently not the world's greatest unzipper. I usually find it faster and less frustrating to just snip it and pull it out short sections at a time. This is the stranded provisional cast on. The first one shown uses waste yarn. Leaving a short tail, place a slip knot on the needle held in your right hand. As mentioned in the introduction, do not count this slip knot as a stitch. As you work across these stitches on the following row, drop it off and undo it. Lay the waste yarn over this main yarn and hold as shown, similar to the hand position for the long tail cast on, except the fingers point toward the right hand instead of up. We will be using these strands on top of the thumb and forefinger. There are 2 stitches involved with this cast on. First, bring the needle over and then under the forefinger strand. This is actually just a yarn over. Then go under the strand on the thumb, over the forefinger strand, then forward under both strands. Make sure that the 2 strands are brought down so that they cross under the needle. Yarn over, under thumb, over forefinger, under both. I am ending with a long tail cast on just to secure the yarns so that I can show you the results. You would end with the second step, holding it carefully in place until you work it on the following row. This is what it will look like after you have added a few rows. When you need these stitches again, run a needle through each live stitch and then remove the waste yarn. Now I'm going to do the same cast on, except I'll use the cable from a cable needle to replace the waste yarn. Hold the cable over the yarn, yarn over, under the cable, over the forefinger yarn, and back under the cable. This eliminates having to place the live stitches on a needle. Your live stitches will be all ready to use when you need them.